picked a bad spot.
From has to be one of the most interesting shows out there. The convoluted mythos of this strange town that is nowhere to be found on any map really has all of us waiting with bated breaths for each next episode. Now, we're currently in Season 3, which is very close to wrapping up, but the mystery of this place is nowhere near being solved. Despite that, we, the fans, are super excited to be a part of this ride. Although on the surface, it might seem like the story is going nowhere, creators Jack Bender and John Griffin insisted that they have an idea of where they want to plot ahead. They also stated that the ending of the show is right in front of our eyes. The ending is going to be something that is surprising but also inevitable. And when we look back at the beginning of the series after finishing the show, we will feel like the ending was justified. Now, these are all good enough claims, but let's be honest. None of us like that each season is only 10 episodes long. We want answers, and we want them now, especially when it comes to the whole big bad entity at play who seems to control everything. What is it? What does it want? Why does it keep bringing seemingly random people into this inescapable town? Well, let's see what passionate From fans have theorized over the years about From. Be aware that all these theories are just speculations and nothing has been confirmed as of yet. While the show is generally categorized as horror and science fiction, these theories would delve deeper into the broad mythology with many supernatural aspects. From has already blended the supernatural with science fiction in a beautiful way. So, I would not put these mythology-focused theories aside. So, join us as we take a deep dive into the theories about the creation of Fromville. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means an awful lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Keep looking out the window because the answers to all your questions are out there. Was this quote from John Griffin a clue? When you look out of the window in Fromville, what do you see? The woods! That's right. When John Griffin mentioned this in his interview, that really struck a chord in me. Could it be that the woods have the answers that we're looking for? Well, let's find out. The first time Jade saw the mysterious symbol in Season 1, I was not sure what it could have meant. I personally thought it was one of those cultish symbols. However, in the second season, we finally realized that the symbol he has been seeing has been the roots of trees all along. The symbol has been changing slightly every time Jade saw it, and now that we know it is made up of roots, it makes sense. Maybe the roots are growing rather than moving in a serpentine fashion, and that is why the symbol keeps changing too. When I look at the root symbol, the first thing I am reminded of is the roots we see wrapped around the trunks of the faraway trees. Now, in one of the scenes in caves, we saw the roots tightly woven together, almost looking like a heart. While it is not an anatomical heart, in the split second we got to see it, it felt like an organ in motion. We have seen that each faraway tree has its own mind. Even Martin confirmed it when he was speaking with Boyd, saying that the entity at play gets to you when you step through the tree. Now, could it be that the knot that we saw is actually the heart of the tree entity that controls this whole town? The only way you can enter the town is when you see the fallen tree, and the only confirmed way you can leave the town is also via another tree, the faraway bottle tree. Now, why do I feel like the tree entity plays a role in this town? So let's go back to the cave scene where we saw the drawings. Victor pointed out that the creatures are the ones who draw these, so whatever we're seeing here is from their perspective. The three colors used here are red, white, and black. I'm sure many of our keen viewers have noticed the soul tree drawn in black next to what seems to depict the forest. This has to be the fallen tree, but it is drawn in black, whereas every other tree is drawn in white. I think it means that the fallen tree, drawn in black, is an extension of the main tree entity at play here. The symbol in the cave is also drawn using black, so maybe one of the roots of this symbol represents the roots of the fallen tree. The other two roots in the symbol also represent the trees. One of them might represent the root of the bottle tree, and the other one has to be for another faraway tree. This other faraway tree I am referring to is a speculation on my part. The bottle tree only works for the chosen ones, so there has to be another faraway tree that works for every other townsfolk who is not the chosen one. I think the reason we saw this symbol change slightly over the course of the 3 seasons is that both the Chosen One and the townsfolk members in general are making progress, while the fallen tree is luring more and more victims. Speaking of the bottle tree, in many cultures, bottles are hung on tree branches to ward off evil spirits. Each bottle on the bottle tree contains what seems to be dates, including the ones we saw on the lighthouse wall. I think that each of these dates implies the time evil triumphed over good and a town massacre like the one Victor witnessed happens. If I had to guess guess I would say that maybe the bottles are hung on the tree to prevent anyone with evil intentions from passing through it. We do not know for sure how the faraway trees connect the two locations. The dungeon Boyd ended up in could be an actual location in itself, but I think it is more like this weird mind place created by the tree entity where it keeps the souls of the victims that it feeds upon. Am I saying that the music box monster and the main tree entity could be the same thing? Well, yes, you betcha. I do think that the music box monster was a taste of what's coming for our heroes. When Jade saw the ghoulish kids, these children seemed to be lying on the sacrificial beds, gazing up at the symbol. Just beyond the symbol, you have the sky, implying freedom. Over the past 2 seasons, we know one thing for sure: the whole spiel of the main entity is feeding off of the hope of people in the town. So what if the kids were given to the tree entity to appease it? The ghoulish kids are extremely pale, so I would not be surprised if they were used as blood sacrifices. The blood of the kids is what made this entity so powerful, and that is why the town members are going through so much now. Another fun little tidbit you can notice in the cave paintings: the people are drawn using red, which I can assume to be the creatures shown surrounding a field of crops. Now, we've seen their internal organs. There is no way that they're eating vegetables like we do, so I think that this field of the crops in the cave painting is actually the townsfolk who are brought in to use as food for the main entity. At first glance, the huge red entity in the cave drawing seems to be some sort of eldritch horror, but if you look closely, you can definitely see the tree heart and the root systems as 2 parts of this monster. Maybe the roots run a lot deeper than we initially thought. While the root symbol focuses on the same roots, the rest of it could be the reason Victor keeps measuring the tree line as they keep moving. I also feel like whenever someone dies in the town, the tree entity sucks up their memories and uses them against the survivors in the town. We have seen multiple appearances from Abby, who clearly seems to be in cahoots with the entity whenever she shows up. We also saw Nathan's fear of cicadas come to life when the music box monster was out and about doing its thing. We have seen time and time again that this town is almost like a living, breathing being and somehow knows everything that is happening in the town during daytime. Whenever the townsfolk try a bit too hard to solve the mystery surrounding the place, the town pushes back against them, rendering them helpless. When Boyd broke the music box monster, the town retaliated by destroying the crops, poisoning the soil, and changing the weather, but we never see any tree die or wither away. The best way to defeat the tree entity would be using fire, which seems to work wonders in this town overall, or by freeing the children trapped in the tower, which we have heard about so many times. I think the best thing to do right now would be to do both. That way the cycle would be broken for good. Could it be that Griffin's detailed mythology is inspired from the Fae? There is no denying that in the mythos of Fromville, there has been some subtle nods at European mythology overall. Now, I know if I straight up tell you, hey, yeah, so the From TV show is based on fairies. Now, that's going to sound crazy, but from whatever clues there are present in the show, it does not seem all that improbable. I mean, the word Fae literally translates into from in Old Scottish. While this is very much on the nose, it makes sense, doesn't it? Now, what is a Fae? Well, pop culture literature would have us believe they're super hot-looking people with magic. Mythologically, that is not quite accurate. Fae are mythological beings who are otherworldly. They go by many names such as fairies, kind ones, good neighbors, and even little folks. The Fae show up over and over again when you look into the mythology from Northern Europe. Each time they show up, they have different traits. A few common traits are magic, turning into a monster, witchcraft, illusions, and even shape-shifting and controlling light. Throughout folklore, Fae are usually mischievous things. They commit vandalism, steal things, and sometimes they even commit murders. However, on rare occasions, the Fae does help humans. Now, why do I think that the people we follow in the Fromville have been kidnapped by the Fae? The first thing that everyone sees when they step foot into the Fromville territory has to be the crows. Now, I believe these crows are actually sluagh. These are supernatural creatures that show up time and time again in Scottish and Irish folklore. They are also said to be seen as a flight of birds. The sluagh are the hosts of unforgiven dead, and they usually pick people up and take them to faraway lands. Sounds a lot like Fromville, doesn't it? While the crows may not physically carry the people to the town, seeing these crows is what seals the fate of every unsuspecting person who comes across them. While the creatures that we come across in the Fromville do not share a similarity with the Fae other than the murderous traits and the shape-shifting, I do believe they follow the same Fae rules. For example, one of the most common ways ways to deter a fae from you is using bread and iron. Boyd's nickname in the armed forces was Mr. Fish and Loaves. Coincidence? I think not. The creatures keep targeting everyone around him, but just not him, even though Boyd is the one man who has been pushing against the town ever since he got here. So it would make sense to take him out first, but no, I believe that by giving him this nickname, the showrunners are hinting that he is able to brush off the effects of the entities at play that other people can't. I know what you guys are thinking. What about Abby? Abby's nickname was Iron Abby. She should have also been able to brush off the fae effects, right? Well, if you look back to her scene in the flashback, you would notice that Abby mentions that this place reminded her of a dream she had. Maybe, and this is just a big maybe, but what if Abby too was supposed to be a chosen one? She too saw the town in her dreams when she was young, and that is why the Stevens family got trapped. But sadly, Abby's dreams, which were supposed to guide her out of this hellhole, ended up becoming her death sentence because she could not differentiate between the dream and the reality. She assumed that maybe she was still stuck in her dream, and that is why she started killing everyone she could find, and Boyd had no other choice but to shoot her down. While you ponder over that, let me tell you what other clues of the Fae I've found in the show. So, Faes have a Fae court, which divides the fairies according to the seasons they are connected with. You have the Seelie and the Unseelie. The Seelie are associated with summer and spring, while the Unseelie are associated with winter and autumn. When the seasons roll around, the Faes associated with that season are stronger in power. Now, in the beginning of the story, we saw the township was stuck in the summer and spring. As Victor mentioned, the town never changed seasonally until Boyd destroyed the music box, that is, then winter came. Could it be that the reason that Boyd was having so much success while it was an all-time summer in the town was because he could not be stopped by the Seelie? Now that the Unseelies are in charge, that is why Boyd is having such a rough time. I also feel like the reason of all these people are trapped in the Fromville is because they're a part of the Wild Hunt. A Wild Hunt is a folklore-based event where ghostly hunters along with dogs chase after a mythical being. The leader of these hunts can be Odin or even Satan himself. In this hunt, the hunters would abduct and torment people who failed to find a place to hide. It is said that these hunts would be precursors or plagues or other such natural calamities that would have devastating effects. So it makes total sense if the people in Fromville are collateral that is taken by the Fae to make sure the hunt goes on. The town massacre that Victor managed to survive could just be one of those hunts that was finished. Another reason why I feel like the Faes could be playing a bigger role in the show than we think is because of the electrical situation in the town. So when Tabitha dug the hole to find where the electrical main line went, she found it dangling in midair with nothing connected to it. I have already told you that the Fae can control light, so it makes sense if the Fae that controls this town uses light and turns it into electricity. Also, we saw how bright the light from the lighthouse can be. It was a blinding light that Boyd and Sarah saw when they camped out in the forest for the night. But when we went inside the lighthouse with Tabitha, the flame we saw did not even seem to be big enough to be that bright. This is also why I have a feeling that Fae might be at play here. The mythos surrounding the Fae is vast and leaves a lot for interpretation. However, these subtle signs and connections that we can see throughout the season seem to point in their direction. Newfoundland and Fromville. Are they the same place? The Beathok Explorers, Witch, Board and Card Games Theory. Season 2 Finale, The Origin. It is clear that From is an American-focused show. Its name Origins in foreign markets suggests an origin in American history. John Cabot and the Cordy-Reals were the only 3 medieval European explorers to reach North America, Newfoundland, before 1506, earliest known date. All 3 mysteriously disappeared on their return. Newfoundland was once home to the Beathok people. They painted themselves in red ochre, as with the red stick figures in the cave paintings. The explorers wore Tudor clothing with ruffs, like in Ellis's mysterious painting. When you have a doubt about anything from scams to popular fan theories, the best place to go has to be Reddit. And when it comes to From, one of the most popular theories about the show can be found on the subreddit r/FromTVEpics. Here, one user, u/Taran Matharu, theorized that maybe the whole show is based on Newfoundland and the Fromville is an artistic depiction of this quaint place. Now, you might wonder why they think that. Well, as it turns out, in several interviews, John Griffin mentioned how the 9/11 incident serves as the biggest inspiration for this show. When the incident took place, several airplanes were diverted to Newfoundland, and the villagers of that place took care of the passengers, gave them food and housing while they waited for the planes to run again. So it makes sense that the Fromville we see is completely based on the history of Newfoundland. But that is not the only reason why the user feels so strongly about the story being set in Newfoundland. There are some more clues that they have pointed out in their Reddit post. Going into the intricacies of the Reddit post is beyond the scope of this video, so if you're curious about it, I definitely suggest you check out the theory. But for this video's purposes, we will be looking into some of the most prominent clues that the showrunners have sprinkled throughout the seasons that the user has noted and connected with the history of Newfoundland. When Tabitha went inside the lighthouse in her vision in the first season, we saw a lot of dates etched into the walls. One of the earliest dates we saw was 1506. As it turns out, 1506 is also the earliest known date before which John Cabot and the Corte Reals were the European explorers who reached Newfoundland. Now, Newfoundland used to be the home to the Beothuk people. These people used red color to depict themselves in their paintings, which could mean that the red stick figures we saw in the cave drawings were referring to them. The explorers I mentioned earlier used to wear Tudor clothing, and yes, we saw these clothes depicted in Ellis's paintings. In the cave drawings, we saw white stick figures arriving at the place in boats, and I'm sure you have guessed by now, these stand for the explorers who mysteriously disappeared when they were returning from this place. Now, Cabot's ship was called the Matthew, and it is said that he could have been marooned at Newfoundland. That is why he did not return. Now, if the explorers were marooned, they probably took shelter in the Vinland Viking ruins, as the barter system was pretty prevalent back in the days. It would have made sense if they created gifts in exchange of services from the native residents. The place where they could have done this exchange is Boyd's Cove, a very real local service district in Canada. When Jim was drawing on his walls to solve the mystery, he did draw a large island which could be referring to Newfoundland. Now let's look at the society in Newfoundland back in the day. So on one side, we had Christians and the pagans. It is said that Cabot's son left his father and married the healer of the pagans. Sounds a lot like Boyd and Ellis, no? Now also, if there's a Thanksgiving between the Beothuk and explorers, it could have been with peaches, which happens to be Victor's favorite fruit. There is a lot of speculation happening here, so definitely take everything I am saying with a grain of salt. Now let's look at the boogeyman. The last known Beothuk, Shanau Deethit, wrote about Ike Mudyim, who was a man in black. We've seen a man in black in several paintings by Victor. This man in black was often accompanied by a sea monster, and the red entity drawn in a cave looks a lot like a sea monster, does it not? It is said that this boogeyman basically stays all around, watches everything unfold without being seen. It would make a lot of sense if you put it in perspective of the show. When Boyd was trapped in a dry wall, a rope was thrown to him. Martin said he threw the rope, but how could he? Wouldn't it make so much more sense if there was another entity at play who threw the rope? This entity would have been the one who banged against the camper floor and even shapeshifted into the fake Abby who tried to make Boyd stay. Remember, Mary kept saying someone was in her room when she was moved to the colony house before getting taken by the cicadas. She could have seen the boogeyman herself, but it was just out of her sight. So, while she felt the presence, she had no confirmation. Similarly, when Boyd comes across a dog in a forest, it looks like the dog is staring behind Boyd and not at him. There is another version of the boogeyman that I would like you all to consider. In the Inuit religion, there is a mention of Ijirak. This is a shape-shifting creature who is infamous for kidnapping children, has glowing red eyes, and often steals memories of people. We saw a black creature with red eyes in Victor's drawing. This could be a reference to Ijirak, and if it truly exists, that could be the reason why Victor does not remember a lot of his past. In the Inuit religion, we also learn about the Tutarjuit. These malicious spirits are the spirits of the string game. They make deals for the children's soul and disembowel themselves to play the string game with the guts. Now, where do we see this reference in the show? Any guesses? Yep, the creatures. They keep referring to their actions as a light-hearted game, and they disembowel their victims, leaving the guts hanging around like strings. Now, coming back to the Corte Real brothers, they returned to Newfoundland somewhere between 1501 and 1502. They arrived together, and that is why two cars arriving is such a huge deal. The voices that Sarah heard blamed the two cars arriving for the massacre, and Victor was all worried about this arrival too, asking Julie what it could mean. The Reddit post also delves deep into the theory about how the From TV show might end and what the premise could all be based off of, but that is a topic for perhaps a different video. Marvelous verdict. This TV show is a ride that you simply cannot get off once you're on board. The story, the characters, the premise, everything about this show is impeccably crafted, and it is no wonder that the show is finally gaining its well-deserved popularity. All of these theories are created by the fans for the fans in the hopes to come up with some answers, while the show gives us none. While it is all fun and games to theorize, I'm sure all of us are waiting to see what the showrunners have in store for us. What do you guys think will happen? Do you guys feel any of these theories could be true? Well, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And I'll see you guys on our next marvelous video.
If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.